opening so that a few other people can sort of come in before we start. I'm Alex Hoffman-Zobel. I'm a compliance specialist, or compliance associate here at the City of Kalamazoo. I'll be doing the majority of the presentation, but I am co-presenting with Julie Johnston, who is a compliance specialist with the city. She'll pop in for a portion of the presentation. We'll sort of go through some income verification stuff that might be new to a lot of you. So with that in mind, I also want to let you know that all questions will be answered at the very end of this presentation. So you'll notice that you're muted and your cameras are off, but you are free to write comments in the chat section, and we will get to all of those at the very end of the presentation. So feel free to type them in as things pop up to you, but don't be discouraged if we're not acknowledging them right away. We'll try and get to them at the end. If we do run out of time and aren't able to take on a lot of questions and answers at the end as well, we'll include our email address as always so that you can continue to write things to us if you have questions going forward. We're happy to work with everyone and anyone who has questions on this process and are interested in learning more. So with that in mind, we'll get started. This is the HUD Grant fundamental training on reporting, income verification, and record keeping. So to sort of go into our timeline here, we sort of went over the home program and the CDBG program in January, went over some program financial management in February. This month, we'll be covering a lot, so we're going to try and squeeze this all in and into the hour that we have here today. But it is a lot. So like I said, if we sort of find ourselves jutting up towards the end of our time, of our hour, we'll try and answer all of the questions as quickly as we can, but no guarantees we'll be able to take a ton. The agenda is we'll be going over reporting, which will cover the monthly, quarterly, annual reporting that's expected of you as a subrecipient of the city, income verification, supporting evidence, record keeping, and personally identifiable information. So to start, we're going to begin with reporting. The way that HUD programs will generally work is, the HUD is giving us these funds as an entitlement community, and then we are writing agreements with you as subrecipients to sort of use these funds to provide utility benefit to the community. And through reporting, we're able to get a good picture of your progress in complying with that agreement. And it even gives us a picture of maybe things that you might need help with, or ways that we can get in touch with you and maybe optimize the way that you're running the program. Reporting is sort of this vital portion of information transacting between the city and the subrecipient, though. So in this presentation, we're going to cover sort of 3 types of cyclical reporting. Every month there will be reporting requirements. There's also quarterly reporting requirements, and then there are annual reporting requirements as well. And so you'll want to keep those 3 cycles in mind as a subrecipient of when you'll need to submit reports. Of course, we'll be there to help and remind, and this will all be sort of laid out in the agreement as well. But these are generally sort of the timestamps that you'll want to be cognizant of as you're moving through the program. So to start monthly reporting, these are largely the requests for reimbursements. So these are due on the 20th of each month. This is sort of our new reimbursement report that we're issuing out. Some of our subrecipients might, their heart might be beating a little bit faster because it's like, this is not what my reimbursement reporting form looks like at all. This is we'll be slowly rolling these out over time. You'll likely hear something from us fairly soon within this year, as we're trying to make this system a little bit better. We're moving back to sort of an Excel spreadsheet format, and that'll allow for formulas to do a lot of work, and it will also allow us to keep a better track of how much you've expended in your program so far, how much you need to continue to expend. It'll just be overall, I think, a more simplified format. So with that in mind, when we're doing monthly reporting, we really only want you to send financial information. We don't want information on the beneficiaries of the program, like any sort of personally identifiable information of them. We'll talk about that in more detail later in the presentation, but for now, it's just important to keep in mind, because these are reimbursement reports, what we really need to see is the relevant financial information. So continuing on, these are some of the things that we'll want to see included with the monthly financial report. So like I said, completely financial information. You'll want to always include a general ledger that sort of details expenditures or your debits and credits, right? You'll want to always include invoices and receipts. For payroll or contractors, paid hourly, timesheets, payroll summary. You can see sort of these other items as applicable. I won't go through all of them, but you can see some things on there like match documentation. So this would be if your program has a match requirement, you would need to include proof of your match contribution. So that, depending on what you're actually doing, that might include receipts of cash expenditures that you're providing that's going towards your match, anything like that. There's also signed receipts of cash disbursements. This is something that may not be obvious, but if you're running a program that would involve this, you would likely know. So an example of this would be like stipends for participants of your program. All of this, this other category, it'll be very individual to programs, and that's something that will likely work with you on a program by program basis to sort of understand what we're expecting to see from you when you're submitting your request for reimbursement reports. Timesheets. So submitted timesheets, they must have funding sources associated with the hours worked and be signed by both the employee and the supervisor. So this is something we commonly see missed by our subrecipients. It can't just be signed by one or the other. There needs to be two signatures on there, the employee and the supervisor. It's also important to keep in mind with timesheets that we only want to see direct time applied, like time used towards working on the program that we're funding. We don't want to see like paid time off, anything like that applied to the grant. So this is an example of a timesheet. You can see that there's a distinction there between the grant itself on the timesheet and then vacation pay that's probably coming from some other line item source. There's the name, there's a section for a signature for both the employee and the supervisor. And you can see by each day, there's sort of different denominations of hours that the employee had worked towards that program. Quarterly reporting. So these will be your accomplishment reports. Your accomplishment reports are supposed to capture like this greater picture of how your program has been running, the actual effect it's been providing for the community. It's a good way for us to see sort of how everything is progressing as the life of your agreement has been going on. This specific reporting, quarterly reporting document I have here, it's for a CDBG housing quarterly report. So you'll want to keep in mind that your quarterly report may not look exactly like this. There are different requirements depending on the funding source. And in fact, there are some very rare instances where we expect beneficiary data more on a monthly basis, and you wouldn't have a quarterly reporting form like this at all. But that would be very rare. And I wouldn't expect that if you're someone coming in and applying for funding. So just keep that in mind. Let me see. Oh, sorry about that. So accomplishment reports, these will be due on the 20th following the end of your quarter and at the close of your grant. You'll need to include supporting documentation, and that will often include income certification generated through the HUD webpage or self-certification forms for beneficiaries. Julie will be going over that in more detail later in this presentation. So if you're at all confused on what those might mean, we'll be going really in depth into that in just a moment. So this is sort of an example of some beneficiary data that is reported on a quarterly basis by a program. it's very important that the quarterly numbers match and that the program year-to-date numbers are calculated correctly from quarter to quarter. Remember that you can only count each household once. So, if in one household that it's a family of 5, you can't say you helped 5 people, you helped one household. And you'll also want to make sure that if you reported that household in quarter 1, because you started intake for them or something, but then you helped them, like you actually did like a home repair or something like that in quarter 3, you can't report it a second time. That first time you reported it in quarter 1 is sufficient for reporting that you had helped that household. So these should sorry, one moment. My notes kind of messed up a little bit there. If you're so when you're reporting these quarterly reports, they should only be reported per program year. If your agreement includes an extension or crosses a program year, the household served to date reverts back to 0. So when you're counting households, sorry if I had laid that out in a bit of a confusing way. When you're counting households, you do it sort of year to date. When we're talking about race and ethnicity, you can see on this quarterly report here that's included in the data that's provided. You want to make sure that you're reporting this correctly. It can be a little bit confusing at times, but the way to sort of remember it is race is a person's self-identification with one or more social groups, generally based on societal factors, physical appearance and cultural backgrounds, where ethnicity for HUD reporting purposes determines whether a person is of Hispanic origin or not. So therefore, it can be the case that ethnicity is divided into these 2 mutually exclusive categories, Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino. Hispanic origin can be viewed as the heritage, nationality, lineage, or country of birth of the person before arriving in the United States. So both Hispanics and non-Hispanics may report as any race or combination. If that was confusing, we can always talk about that in more detail. But it's, it's just the case that when you're reporting on race, there should still be something for Hispanic or Latino, the ethnicity. They are mutually exclusive categories. They're not mutually exclusive categories, my apologies. You'll want to double check your math as well when you're doing these quarterly reports. Here is an example of a case where the math was done incorrectly. You'll notice at the top that the total beneficiary served to date is listed as 208 households. However, when you look down at the bottom, the program year to date, they have a total of 509. And this might be a case of what I had mentioned earlier of maybe they were counting households at one point and then they were counting individual households in another. It's not entirely clear from looking at it, but this is something that will toss up red flags for us, and we'll likely come back to you and ask for more details on why this report's math doesn't add up, and we'll likely need you to resubmit. In this case, it most certainly needs to be resubmitted. So one final aspect of quarterly reporting, there's a 4th quarter and project closeout reporting document that is slightly different. So this will be this will include sort of an additional narrative, and it gives you a space as the subrecipient to communicate to us in more detail some of the problems that you're working through with your program. In this space, you'll be free to talk about your performance outcomes, give feedback on what has most affected your overall performance, and provide a picture of how recruitment and outreach efforts have worked for you throughout the period of your agreement, or throughout the year, depending on which one it is, the 4th quarter or the project closeout one. This will all be included in your agreement as well, so you'll be able to see what that type of reporting will look like. But it's just to give us an even more in-depth picture of how the program went for you. This gives us more information to provide to HUD, and it also gives us more tools to work with when we're doing these programs in the future, helping our subrecipients be more successful in the ways that they run their programs. Annual reporting. So in annual reporting, you could see Section 3 reporting that would apply for both CDBG and home funds. There's equipment and supply reporting that applies largely to CDBG. And there's project compliance reporting, and that'll apply to home. We'll sort of go over them each in detail here. So Section 3. Section 3 requires subrecipients to hire contractors, employees who are low-income persons in the community. So reporting on Section 3 will often involve you listing sort of your outreach efforts as well as the Section 3 workers that you have hired. This, I mean, largely, if you're interested in understanding this in more detail, we can talk about it. But like I said, this will apply to both CDBG and home funds. So you'll need to be cognizant of this as you're looking to contract out or hire employees for your program. Equipment and supplies. So we often discourage purchasing equipment with such high acquisition costs as this sort of $5,000 or more bar. However, if such an expenditure is needed for your program, we'll work with you to understand the requirements of this type of reporting in more detail. When you report on these, you have to give a lot of information because this is equipment bought with federal funds. And so the federal government wants a good picture of how this equipment is used, what the condition of the equipment is, like where the equipment is located, and things such as the depreciation value. So if you are intending to buy equipment that sort of goes over this threshold, you'll just need to keep in mind that these reporting requirements are there, and you'll likely want to reach out to us to talk with us about what this is going to look like for your program moving forward. Project compliance. So this, like I said, it's largely for home funds. This is a rental housing report. So this is an example of what you would actually fill out annually. And what you're doing with this project compliance report is you're verifying the annual income of the tenants who you're renting to. You can allow the tenants to self-certify every other year, but we do need to see when you get back to that second year or that first year, whichever way it would go, that you are actually verifying pay stubs and anything else that would come with making sure that you're doing a proper verification of income. Again, we'll talk about that in just a moment of what that would actually look like. And submitting reports. So when you are ready to submit your monthly, quarterly, annual report, you'll send them to cpedcompliance@kalamazooCity.org. You'll want to make sure that any reporting that is personally identifiable information is encrypted. This will also be covered in this presentation later on. So I'll sort of save that for when we get to the end of the presentation. Okay, and with that, we're going to move on to income verification. This part, Julie Johnston is going to handle. She's going to run through an example for you. So I'll give it over to her.
Thanks, Alex. Let me just get myself organized here. Okay. So yes, we're going to talk about income verification, and we're going to spend some time on how you go about that process to make sure that everyone is aware of the importance of completing this income verification. So we have to, with our CDBG and our home programs, ensure that the people that we are serving meet income limits that are established by HUD. There are two ways to collect income documentation and complete this verification. One is through the HUD Income Eligibility Calculator, and we're going to spend some time going through that today so you can see how that works. And then the other is self-certification. Self-certification outside of the home program in rental projects is only allowed through CDBG for public service activities. And we're going to talk a little bit about what public service activities are in just a minute, but we're going to go through both of these income verification allowances. If you receive funding from the city, you should always check your agreement to see which of these income verification requirements are allowed by your agreement. If you're a housing provider, we're always going to have you use the HUD income eligibility calculator. If you're a public service provider, then we would allow you to use the self-certification forms. Okay, so the income eligibility calculator is found on the HUD Exchange website, and we're going to run through that today. HUD has 3 different ways that we can define income. And the city, as the participating jurisdiction with HUD, we have to decide which of those 3 definitions we're going to use. And we have decided that it's the IRS Form 1040 adjusted gross income method that we use for all of our projects. So when you hear that, you might think that you must collect tax forms to be able to utilize this method. And to be perfectly honest, collecting tax forms would be the easiest way to manage this income verification method, but it's not required. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Alex to stop sharing, and I'm going to take us through the income eligibility calculator. So let me start sharing. And Alex, if you can confirm that you can see that. Okay, great. Okay, so as I said, this can be found on the HUD Exchange website. You would go to HUD Exchange Info Income Calculator, and you would want to go to My Dashboard. So when you click on that, it's going to take you to this CPD Income Eligibility Calculator login page. If you do not have a login with HUD Exchange, you can get one. It's very easy. Just log on to HUD Exchange and set yourself up as a user, and then you can use this CPD income eligibility calculator. So once you've got your login in, you click on login. Oh, and you can see right here, it says create an account. So you can do that right there. And it'll take you to this dashboard. The dashboard is going to show beneficiaries that you have reviewed in the past. The intent of this dashboard is to have the information put in here somewhat anonymously, so you can create beneficiary IDs that don't give away any personal information of the person that you're inputting the data on. So what we're going to do today is start a new calculation. So you click on new calculation. Oops, I'm sorry, let me go back. Right here, it says select a program to start your new calculation. I apologize, I missed that. You are more than likely, it's going to be our Community Development Block Grant users, awardees that will use this system. So you'd want to hit Community Development Block Grant and then new calculation. Now, this is where it's going to ask you what national objective is being met. If it's not obvious to you from this information, go to your agreement, because that will tell you what national objective your agreement was approved under. So we're just going to do a low mod housing objective for this one today. So you'd click on that and then hit continue. Then it's going to ask you to put in some beneficiary ID. So again, this is where you can put in a number, you can create some type of system for your beneficiaries so that you have consistent numbers going in. I'm just going to do JJ for Julie Johnston and then a number. And then it asks you how many members are in the household. So let's do 3 for this one and then hit continue. Okay, so then when you get to this, it's asking you again for a beneficiary member ID. And if there's 3 households, you could just call them 1, 2, and 3 members are in this household. Which one of these members is the head of household you need to click? So we'll say number 1 is the head of household, And this household has 2 children under the age of 18. So we'll click those 2. The reason for this is because if it's a co-head of household, another adult is there, they might contribute to the income. So you want to make sure you have a place within the calculator to include their income. So if this was a 4-member household and it was, 2 adults that contributed to the income, you would click one of them as the co-head of household and then click continue. Excuse me. Okay, now the HUD Exchange wants to know where you're located because depending on what community you live in, there's going to be different income limits allowable for that community. Someone who lives in San Francisco is going to have a different income limit than someone that lives in Kalamazoo. So we want to go in and put our state. And then for us, our area is going to be the Kalamazoo Portage MSA. So we are looked at as a metropolitan statistical area, an MSA, instead of single city of Kalamazoo. And then for any of our CDBG programs, it's always going to be an 80% income limit. All of your agreements are going to say 80% or below is an allowable or an eligible household. Some of our home programs, if you are receiving home funding or you may in the future receive home funding, we may have a different income limit for you. It could be 60 or 50% AMI. If you're doing some supportive service type rental project, it might be a 30% AMI is your limit. But for CDBG, it's going to be 80%. So at this point, it's the HUD Exchange is going to tell you what that income limit is for a 3-member household. So at 80%, it's $66,000 currently. So you can see here it says 2023. So HUD has not come out with 2024 income limits yet. When they do, this HUD Exchange calculator will be updated. Now, some of our subrecipients that we currently have are printing this page and putting it in their file and calling it done. That is actually incorrect. You do not need to print this page because this information that tells you for a 3-member household they can make $66,000 is going to show up at the end of this calculation on the document that you should print. So if you are a current subrecipient and you're printing this page and putting it in your files and thinking you're done, you have not finished the process. So you can move on from here. You don't have to print anything at this point. So we hit continue. And then it's going to ask us if your project is part of a low income housing tax credit. This is not going to affect hardly any, if any, CDBG subrecipients. This potentially could affect a home subrecipient. If we've provided home funding to a rental project and they're also a low-income housing tax credit project, then you would just need to get with us and we'll work with you to ensure incomes are accurate. But for 99% of you, you're just going to hit no here and move on. Then the next is going to ask you which one of the income definitions has the city chosen to use. And here is that IRS Form 1040 adjusted gross income that we talked about earlier. You're always going to want to hit that to move forward with determining income calculations. And then finally, we get to the point where we actually put in income information. So you can see here they have pages for all 3 of the people that we have indicated live in this household. This household, though, only has one person who has an income, who produces an income. The other are children under the age of 18 and do not produce an income. So those 2 pages you would just ignore. If there were 2 people that you had to report income on, then you would go to page 2. So head of household would be 1 and page 2 would be the other person in the household that generates income. So on page 1, it's going to ask you for the information related to their income. So these are the things under the 1040 IRS form that HUD or the IRS counts as income. So wages and salaries, interest, dividends, IRA distributions, pensions and annuities, Social Security benefits. So if you happen to work with seniors that are retired, their income may be coming just from pensions and Social Security benefits. If you're working with a family that is actively employed, then it's largely going to come from this wages, salaries, and tips. Just one second. Okay, excuse me. So you can see why having their tax return might be the easiest way to fill out this information, because it's all going to show up on the 1040. If your client does not have their tax return, you can always have them go to the IRS website, set up an account, and you can download tax returns from that website. That is an acceptable form of backup documentation. You do not have to have the tax forms that they hand filled out, or that their tax preparer filled out and that they signed. If you download it from the IRS, then that is a tax form that has been already submitted to the IRS and managed. So it is an acceptable form of backup. But if you don't have that information, you don't have the tax returns, and you're using some other form of backup, you still need to work with your client to make sure that you are collecting the information on these things that are considered income. Now you'll see at the bottom here, there is other income under Schedule 1 and adjustments to income under Schedule 1. Schedule 1 has two parts, just like it's shown here, an income section and an adjustment section. Most of the people that you work with are not going to be utilizing Schedule 1, but there is a place here for you to include that information. If all of their wages, all of their income comes from these categories, wages, dividends, capital gains, Social Security, then they're not going to be filling out a Schedule 1, and you can just put 0 here. Typically, most will take the standard deduction. They may not have enough deductions under Schedule 1, which is this adjustment of income, to get them to a point where they just wouldn't use the standard deduction. But if they have used adjustments to income under Schedule 1, then this is where you would include it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this Schedule 1 in just a minute when we get back to the presentation. But I wanted to make sure that you understood that you shouldn't ignore these two lines. You should talk to your client, make sure they haven't filled out a Schedule 1. If they haven't, then sit down with them and look at it, make sure none of it applies to them, and then put 0 here. In fact, you should fill out all of these, so if the wages, I'm going to just say the wages for this person were $42,000. They had no taxable interest, no ordinary dividends, nothing in pension. So we put 0 in all of these, no capital gains. Let's say under Schedule 1, they won some funds in the lottery that they were required to report. Let's say they won $500 in the lottery. We would put that there, but no other adjustments. Then you would hit, and again, the other 2 members of the household are kids, so we don't have to report anything for them. So then we'd hit calculate. Okay, then this page is going to give you a summary of what you just put in. So wages were $42,000, nothing on the other 2 members of the household. They had some additional income through, hitting the lottery, $500, no adjustments. So their adjusted gross income is $42,500. And then again, here is where it tells you that eligibility limit. 66,000 is allowable for this person. So they are definitely under the 80% requirement and are eligible for your program. A very important part of doing this is this completion date. So on the document that we're going to print out in just a minute, we'll include this date, March 27th, 2024. The reason this is important is because if you do income calculations and it's for CDBG more than 12 months by the time you actually get to providing a service to that household, you have to do the income calculation again. If your records show that you did income in March, but you didn't 2024, but you actually didn't help them until April of 2025, you have to do this income calculation again. For home programs, it's 6 months. So you want to make sure you're doing your income calculations timely. So then we go up here to export to PDF, and it provides you this document that has all the information we just talked about, but it is a place for the household members to sign. We are finding that some of our subrecipients are not getting household members to sign this document. If they have provided income, they need to sign this form. So head of household and any other adult that is included in the income generation needs to sign this form, and then you as the preparer need to sign the form. Please make sure you have these signatures in your file. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. And I see we're 20 minutes from the end of our hour. I'm so sorry this is taking longer than expected. Alex is going to start sharing, and I'm going to quickly go through the last of my slides so he can finish up with record keeping. So it's showing, okay, there we go. Okay, so next slide. So here is that Schedule 1 I was talking about. This form you can download from the IRS and talk it through with your applicant. If you don't have tax returns, please be sure to keep this in the file of your client so that we know that you discussed it with them and that they either didn't have any additional income or didn't have any additional adjustments that needed to be included in the calculator. Okay, self-certification forms. These are for our public service activities. Currently, the main public service activities we have are youth development activities. So those are the only folks right now that can use this self-certification form. This is what the form looks like. So it looks very similar to the document that our housing providers would download from the CPD calculator, except your clients are filling this out to let us know how much income that they have. And you can see, if you can see it, down here there is a warning that says, if they willfully give wrong information, that they can be prosecuted for that. But they're supposed to sign off on this, saying that this is the income that they, their annual income for the year. So some supporting evidence that you need for backup. If you collect tax returns, that's all you need. If you don't collect tax returns under the housing projects and you're doing pay stubs or unemployment benefits or SSI, that's all fine. You collect it, you hold on to it into your client file, you ensure that Schedule 1 is also with that client file, and you hold on to it. For us, for the city, the only thing you're sending us is the download from CPD income calculator. For our public service projects, it's just the self-certification form that you'll submit. We do recommend that if you can get backup, do it. If you can find an easy way to get backup, showing that the income that they've provided is accurate. And it actually doesn't even have to be the income that they've provided. If they are a member or receiving assistance from some other federal or state program, like let's say it's a family that is going to be involved in a recreation program and the family also is on WIC or also has some food assistance program that they're in that is for low income families. By providing that documentation that they're in those programs, that's enough. That shows that they're low income. We don't need that, but you for the city, but you need to keep it in. If you collect it, keep it in the client files so that when we come to monitor, we can see how you ensured that the family was low income. But the self-certification form is the only real requirement for public service activities. Okay, I am done. And so sorry, Alex, you have very little time left.
That is totally fine. I will speed run through the rest. And sort of talking about client files is a great segue into record keeping. So record keeping, there's largely three categories of files and records that we expect you to maintain as a subrecipient, being administrative records, financial records, and project files. We're going to sort of go through all of them each individually so you can understand what they are and what sort of makes them different. Before that, though, we'll sort of talk broadly about file organization and maintenance. Files should be organized to facilitate preparation of reporting to the city of Kalamazoo. We sort of already talked about reporting, but another important part of this is also monitoring, like Julie had briefly mentioned. It's good to keep all of your files methodically organized and kept apart so that when we come to monitor, it's a nice, easy, smooth process. It'll, it'll just make everything simpler and likely improve the overall monitoring experience. So we highly recommend you establish proper file organization practices right at the start of your program. That will save you time once we start, knocking at your door and saying, hey, do you have this file ready? Hey, do you have this handy? You'll know exactly where to go, where to pull it, and you'll get it to us quickly, etc. Right? So administrative records, this is that first category of files and records that we expect you to maintain. This includes sort of all of these listed bullets. I'm not going to go through all of them individually, but you can sort of imagine what might fit into them. Personnel files that would sort of document each employee, job descriptions, org charts, things like that. Property management files that might include things like deed restrictions, list of property improvements, sort of policies and procedures regarding the maintenance of rental properties, things like that. And there's the program funding award file as well, and that will sort of include everything that came with applying for the funds, like your application, your policies and procedures, your grantee correspondence with us, the agreement, things like that. Financial records. So including all of these things here, chart of accounts, accounting procedures manuals, journals, ledgers, etc. Procurement files, that's one that might not be obvious. That would sort of regard policies and procedures regarding your procurements, as well as sort of proof of your due diligence when you're doing procurement. If you want more information on that, our next Lunch and Learn is going to solely involve talking about procurement and how to do that correctly as a subrecipient. So stay tuned for that and you'll get some more information. Audit files are also included in the financial records as well. And then there's project files. So, it's sort of self-explanatory. It would include project activities. It would also include things like regulatory compliance. So this would be if you're someone who has to do site-specific Tier 2 environmental reviews, you'll include records of that in this file. You'll include your records of bids, income verification. You'll also include records of individual beneficiaries. And for record retention, a common pitfall might be that when your agreement is completed, you've done your program, you might think that now all of these records no longer need to be maintained. That is not true. As a rule, records should be retained for 5 years after the last expenditure report is submitted. Even if your agreement is done, like the life of the agreement is completed, you want to make sure you're retaining those files on hand until that 5-year period is done, and then you can safely get rid of them in whatever way you see fit, as long as it's secure. Personally identifiable information. So sort of coming off of this sort of safety and security of records, we want to make sure that the identities of the beneficiaries of these programs is kept safe. that we're not releasing any of that into the public unnecessarily. So it's important to keep in mind that these rules must be followed as a subrecipient. So to start, you can sort of see the definition of personally identifiable information up there in red. It would be any representation of information that permits the identity of an individual to whom the information applies to be reasonably inferred by either direct or indirect means. Quite a mouthful, right? Just a rule of thumb to keep in mind is like, can you identify a person from this information here? There are some more nuanced HUD definitions that you can follow as well to help you sort of figure out whether or not it fits in that category. So you'll want to make sure that all files that contain personally identifiable information is labeled. You want to make sure that they're locked up in whatever way they have to be. If they're electronic or if they're physical, there has to be some sort of protection. Like if it's electronic, all like thumb drives, CDs that information is on cannot be left unattended. You'll want to make sure that there's secure file cabinets, secure offices where there's personally identifiable information, things like that. It's sort of common sense rules, but can often be overlooked if we're not thinking about how this information might help someone identify a beneficiary of the program. It might violate that person's privacy, right? So some more rules for thumb. You'll want to make sure that you only store personally identifiable information in workstations that can be secured. Like I said, you'll want to secure the digital copies. And you'll also want to make sure that you do not send personally identifiable information to the city beyond what has been requested. So we'll see this from time to time. Someone might send in personally identifiable information when they're doing reimbursements or something. We had sort of talked about you'll have to send proof of stipends to beneficiaries in some cases if your program has those. You'll want to make sure that the proof you're sending doesn't actually give us the identifiable information of that beneficiary you're giving a stipend to. That is a pretty sort of off the top of my head example where that might apply. If you are sending us personally identifiable information, it has to be encrypted. And that's something that we'll sort of talk about here. You'll want to make sure that if you're sending the information to the city, the email itself is encrypted. You'll want to make sure that as a subrecipient, your email system has transport layer security encryption by default. What transport layer security means, I don't really know, but that's something that you'll want to talk with IT about. Something that can help you sort of send us things in an encrypted way is you can also reply to our emails. So our emails have a base transport layer security encryption system. So anything replied to one of our emails will be automatically encrypted. But just, to keep in mind as we continue to talk about monitoring through this entire lunch and learn, when we monitor you for compliance, we will check to make sure that you're encrypting personally identifiable information that you're sending electronically. So this is something that's very important to keep in mind. All right, and with that, we are at the end of the presentation with 10 minutes to spare. So there is still time if you have any questions that you would like to write into the chat on anything we've presented today. If you're unsure if you have any questions right now or you want to mull it over for a little bit, you can always send additional questions and comments to us at cpedcompliance@kalamazoocity.org as well. We're more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So with that, Julie, did we get any in the chat?
Yeah, so far, no questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. Well, that must mean that we did a very thorough presentation. That's good.
We'll hang out here for about 5 minutes in case anyone has a question. Feel free to write it in the chat and we'll answer it. If you don't have any questions, then you're free to exit the lunch and learn.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming and for continuing to come to these sort of fundamental modules that we have. They're really important and they cover a lot of really good information.
And the other thing to know, if this information you think others in your organization or outside your organization should know about, we post them on the city's website as well. So in a week or so, this lunch and learn will be posted to the city's website. Okay, so we have a question. Are there supporting documents that need to be sent with the quarterly reports? The only supporting documents that we will need is for the youth programs, we'll need the self-certification forms. If you have incorporated that form into some other type of application, that's fine. You can send us the whole application. If it's a housing provider, then we need the HUD income calculator form that you've downloaded and the beneficiaries have signed. We want to see the forms that you send us that the people that you are serving, at least the head of household, has signed the forms. By signing them, they are basically saying, we agree, this is our income.
That was a great question, Danielle. Thank you.
Any other questions? Can you find the timesheet form you gave us as an example on the city website? Good question. It isn't on the city's website, but if you are interested in it, you please just email us at cpedcompliance@kalamazoocity.org, and we will send you a copy of that timesheet example. Excuse me, a blank copy so you can use it.
That's an interesting idea, though. Maybe having a resource page on our website for like examples of documents that might be useful.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Okay. Any other questions?
Last minute questions.
You got a couple more minutes. Any updates on a Spanish version of the income form? So I reached out to HUD to ask them if there was a Spanish version of the income form, and unfortunately they said no. So we can internally, using our resources, turn the self-certification form into a Spanish version. We would not be able to do that for the HUD income calculation form that you do online, but we can do it for the self-certification form. So I will make a note of that and make sure that we get that done.
There are, so if it's something that you want to fill out with the potential beneficiary, like the online calculator, the city does have resources, Spanish translators that if you were to go into City Hall and sort of ask someone at the front desk if they could bring a Spanish translator down, they would be willing to help you as you went through that process.
Anything else we can help with? We have someone waiting in the lobby. Thank you,
Oh, that's
Maddie.
awesome.
I'm
That's
glad
great
you're
to hear,
learning.
Maddie. Yeah.
Yeah, that was our hope and intent with these, is to get information out to the community. So I'm glad that's working. Okay, we're just about at 12:55, so I think we will wrap this up. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. Again, look for this to be on the website, and next month is procurement, which is a really important part of federal requirements. So if you're interested in that, please come.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.